It's Radio Free 501c, the podcast of Rogue Tulips Consulting. We're here with Season 7. So glad you're joining us. I'm your host, Cecilia Supp, CAEACNP, and I'm so glad you're here for this exciting year of so many great topics, so don't forget to subscribe. This week, I'm joined by another first-time guest. It's Laura Bratton. She's here. She's going to share with us her insights and advice on how we can navigate our way through change. Her advice is actionable and practical, and you can use it now. It's Monday, March 3rd, 2025. Welcome to episode 275. Hey, everybody. It's Monday, March 3rd, and that means it's time for another episode of Radio Free 501c, brought to you by Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm your host, Cecilia Supp. I'm the principal and founder of Rogue Tulips. Thanks for joining us this week. We have another first-time guest. We have so many first-time guests in 2025. I'm really excited about it. So don't forget to subscribe or follow us on your favorite service. And since it's March Madness is upon us. If you haven't joined an NCAA pool yet with your coworkers or friends, you better get on that this week because the tournament is getting underway. To our global audience, I want to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and thank you for joining us. Our topic this week is one that affects all of us throughout our entire life and pretty much all day long, navigating change. And my guest, Laura Bratton, is here to talk with us about how we can do that well. Laura, welcome to the show. You're first-time guest. So excited. We've known each other for a while now, so I've been really wanting to have you on the show, and I'm so glad you're here. And It was so fun prepping for the episode. Would you like to say hello to the audience and tell us a little about yourself?
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. So I'm a professional speaker and I focus on the topic of change management. So how do we navigate through change as we go through different life experiences, the major experiences, the minor, everything in between. And I speak on the topic of change from my own personal experience. So as a teenager, I went from full sight to no sight. So I had to learn how to go through change, how to navigate, how to adjust.
That is an amazing story, and I'm sure it is inspiring. Could you tell us a little bit about your own experience? So you're a teenager and you get this news that eventually you're not going to be able to see anymore. How did you start taking steps to manage that, navigate that change?
So my first reaction was denial. Oh, it's not going to be that bad. Oh, I'll get my vision back really soon. Oh, it's really not going to be that hard. So it was that complete denial. And then slowly, as I accepted the reality of this is actually a major life-changing event, that's when the mindset shift, when I started to go through the grieving process and then had to figure out what are the resources, what are the tools that I can move forward and not just stay stuck in the denial, in the, oh, this is not that bad, when actually it was extremely difficult.
Now, did you take certain steps or specific steps to manage your mindset? Because we all know, even though we forget it sometimes, a positive mindset or a forward-looking mindset serves us better than a negative one. So as you were going through this and acceptance and learning how to live without your eyesight, did you do certain things for your mindset to keep it more positive or open?
Yes. So the first step that was the grit. And what I mean by that, what I found was looking forward at the future was absolutely overwhelming. And that was a major source of my anxiety, the panic attacks, the overwhelm, the frustration was the future looks too hard. It looks too overwhelming. There are too many unknowns. So where the grit came in and the gift of the grit that I found was taking that overwhelming future and breaking it down into tiny, tiny sections. So literally taking it hour by hour by hour. All I have to do is have the strength for this next hour to get through this class, to get through 11th grade, to think about where I'm going to apply to colleges. So having that mindset perspective help that overwhelm become to, okay, these are manageable goals I can tangibly achieve every day. And then that confidence built on itself over time.
And what motivated you to become a motivational speaker, to share some of this practical advice that you gathered?
100% because of my personal experience. As I look back, I wish I had someone who talked about the balance of you grieve and move forward all at the same time. You can have the grit of I have the strength for the hour, but you might not have, oh my gosh, I have the strength for the next year. And that's okay. That's not a weakness. So my passion comes from taking the experience that I've learned, the tools that I've learned, and empowering both individuals and organizations to use these resources as they go through their change.
Well, and we want to talk about the two levels at which we need to manage change. So in our individual life, we need to navigate through a lot of change. I've been doing a lot of that the last couple of years myself. And then there's the organizational change that we need to help our teams get through. So right now it's March 2025, and the new administration is going full bore, breakneck speed, really embodying the Silicon Valley attitude of go fast and break things. This is very unsettling for people. So this change is not only disruptive, but it's unsettling. It's scaring people. People, I think, are fearing the future very much. How you said you felt overwhelmed by the future.
Yes.
So individuals within association staffs may be feeling overwhelmed looking ahead and concerned. So what's some practical steps they could take as an individual to help themselves navigate this really turbulent time of change?
The very first resource is acknowledging the change. Mm-hmm. So rather than jumping immediately to the solution of what do we do to move forward, how do I move my organization forward, first is acknowledging that there is significant change, that this is overwhelming, this is uncertain, that, I feel like I'm doubting my resources to move forward. Just acknowledge that you're feeling that, because that's not a weakness to acknowledge that. That's incredible strength and power to acknowledge it just is what it is. There's a lot of change. It's uncertain. And that's just reality. So the first step is just to acknowledge the current change that you're experiencing. And then the next step is that grit of what I was referring to in those high school days, where I was overwhelmed with the whole picture of the future. Break your change down into, okay, what is the one thing I can do this morning, this particular morning, that will help me move forward in adjusting to that change? So it doesn't have to be a major event that the change you'll have complete confidence to move forward. It's just, what's that one small action that you can take? And the third major piece of that is, once you take that step, give yourself credit. Give yourself credit and gratitude for, wow, that took a lot of courage just to make that one phone call, or reach out to that one person, or have confidence, or just be calm in the midst of change. Give yourself credit for that first step of grit. Because I found in myself and a lot of other people I've worked with, we're quick to try to move forward without acknowledging the courage we're taking in the moment.
Wow. And those are really practical. And I think all of us can do that without any training.
Yes. Yes. 100%. Yes.
And so do you encourage people to practice introspection when they're navigating change?
Absolutely. And again, a very practical resource that I love how you said, without training, is just in those moments of taking those first, what are those action items? just simply take a minute and just take a big deep breath. Just give yourself that 5 seconds, 10 seconds just to breathe, just to let your shoulder, realize that you're holding, and just let your shoulders drop. So again, like you were saying, it's not, okay, go through this 3-month training program. It's just take those simple steps of just breathe, just take a deep breath.
Well, and we all have the power to choose.
Yes.
Even though, again, that's the thing we forget sometimes.
Yes.
Sometimes we say, well, I don't have a choice. I have to do this thing.
Yeah.
But we do have to choose the power to choose how we respond to something, what steps we will take. And you're right. There's that old saying, you don't eat the elephant all at once.
Right.
One bite at a time. So
literally. Yes.
And looking ahead fearfully, I mean, I am a person who has been laid off once, and I'm a person who, was forced out of a job once.
Yeah.
So that is very sudden change. And that's something that I think is a little harder to deal with, because none of that is your choice, when you get laid off or forced out of a job. But when you're looking at situation like we're in now with the Trump administration, and people don't know if they're going to be touched by this disruption. They don't know if they're going to be touched by this change unless they already are. And then that brings us to the organizational level within associations, because there are a lot of associations who do get federal money of some kind, many of them grants, or maybe they're focused on people who work for the federal government. Those people come to their meetings, or maybe some of those people are their members and they may not be able to be members anymore. So they're looking ahead and scrambling, trying to figure out, well, what is that change going to look like? But while leadership's trying to manage the external factors forcing internal reactions, they still have to think about the people on their team.
Yes.
So what are the things that leaders need to keep in mind for helping their teams manage and navigate through these changing times?
Again, the first step is just acknowledge the loss. Acknowledge, as a leader, if I have members that have just lost funding, are going through this uncertainty, just give space and time to acknowledge the loss, to acknowledge the difficulty, rather than immediately jumping into the action of moving forward, which obviously will happen. Just give yourself permission as a leader just to sit with them and just acknowledge and just verbalize, this is really, really hard. This is uncertain. Just as you said, this is major change you are not expecting. Just create space as a leader just to acknowledge the difficulty, just to acknowledge this is not what we thought would happen. This is not what we would want to happen. And yet it's happened. So just giving that time to sit in it then gives us the power to move forward. Because if we move forward before acknowledging the loss or the difficulty, moving forward isn't sustainable. So just as a leader, sitting in that uncomfortable place of pain, of this is the experience we didn't think we would find ourselves in, or where we don't want to find ourselves in, and just sit with that and know that that is a source of strength.
Well, and then leaders have to deal with their emotions when these things happen, but then they have to be there and be that support system for their teams. We're also having lots of emotions that maybe they're not managing. I think any of us who've ever managed a team knows that, sometimes you spend half your day listening to people be upset about something, that's bothering them. And that's part of it. But so okay, so I'm going to ask it this way. So should leaders talk to everybody one-on-one to gauge how they're doing, or should they do a big group, like, hey, everybody, let's all come together as one in one room so we all hear it at the same time, we can all acknowledge it together, and then we can start talking about it? Is there one good way to start that?
No, because unfortunately, this is so difficult because everyone as individuals respond so differently.
Mhm.
So, my advice would be initially kind of both and initially connecting with people individually just to get a quick pulse on where people feel. Some people might be angry, some people might be sad, some people might be like, let's just move forward. So everyone's going to have initial different response. So once as the leader you have a pulse on the individual responses, then I think that's the power of exactly what you were saying. Come together as a group and again, acknowledge what is, then create a plan to move forward. So that's why I say both and initially do the individual check-in and then come together as a group as the leader to guide them forward with the steps ahead.
With that. That's great advice. Laura, I've been thinking a lot lately with all the change just in the world and the changes in my own life. I've been thinking a lot about the book of Job. And for those in the audience who may not be familiar with the book of Job, it's a book in the Bible about a man named Job who was actually doing pretty well for himself. He had wealth, property, a happy family, and he was very devoted to God, and he was one of God's favorites. Well, then the devil decided to make a bet with God. He said, I bet I can make him turn on you if I make his life miserable. And God said, no, I don't think that's going to happen. And the devil said, okay, well, I'll bet you I can. And so God said, all right, let's do it. So the devil took everything away from Job. He made his life miserable. He put him through trials and tribulations, which is why we have that saying about us, like the trials of Job. But throughout the entire story, Job never loses his faith. He assumes this is happening for a reason. And it sounds, Laura, like you might have been coaching him because he acknowledged what was happening and then said, I need to find my grit to find the next steps and just get through this day.
Yeah.
And finally, he almost broke and he ended up not. He was very teetering at the end of the story, but then he didn't. And then
Yeah.
God said, all right, enough, devil. Look at what you've thrown at this guy. He's still here. He's still standing. He's still trying to go forward. And then God gave him everything back.
Yes.
So it sounds, like I said, it sounds to me like you might have been back there coaching Joe.
Well, you bring up a great point about the grit that I think is so important for us as individuals and as leaders to remember in times of major change, in times of uncertainty, of trying to figure out how to navigate forward. The grit is very much taking it hour by hour, day by day. It's also the grit of leaning on others. So, what I mean by that specifically, practically, as you as a leader, lean on who is that other leader that you can lean on to be your support system that you can call when you can say, okay, I'm overwhelmed, I'm confused, I'm exhausted, I can't listen to one more person complain today. I just need you to listen to me complain. Who is that one person that can literally hold the grit for you? So you as a leader are not just out there on an island having to hold your individual grit and the grit of your entire organization, but who is the grit for you? So who, and that takes trust, right? That takes trusting other people and knowing who can I trust with the grit to who can be my source of strength, who can encourage me, who can be that presence to acknowledge the difficulty I'm going through. So thank you. Thank you for saying that because that reminded me of the grit of others. We absolutely need that.
Yeah. Oh, and that's a really important thing for all chief staff executives is
Yes.
to have that support network for when
Yes.
you are going through those tough times. They can't be in the boardroom with you.
Right.
But they can be there to listen and they
Yes.
understand better than somebody who's never been in that job.
Right.
So that's a really great thing to remind us of. And I'm wondering though, Laura, do you have tips for individuals who are going through a lot of things all at the same time? And maybe it's been going on for a couple of years, except maybe the list of things is changing
Changing.
as time goes on because, I've I think we've all done this. I've had periods in my life where things were very tough, where a
Yeah.
lot of things happened all at the same time. So, like, for example, right before my husband and I got married, my mother died suddenly
Mm.
in her sleep. She was only 57
Oh,
and
wow.
died taking a nap. And so that was, of course, very startling for everybody. And it was right
Yeah.
at Christmas time, which was like a big holiday for our family, one of our favorites. And then the next night, one of my brothers who lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was flying up to St. Louis, where we all lived at the time, to come up to be with the family. And my husband and I, we weren't married yet. We were engaged, but we went and picked him up at the airport, and we we're all going over to my great aunt's house. And as we were crossing the street, my now husband, then fiance, and my brother were both run over by a drunk driver driving a panel van. And I somehow saw it out of the corner of my eye and jumped onto the curb and turned around to yell, "Look out." And as I turned around, I saw them both get knocked down. Um, so my husband wasn't seriously injured, but my brother was pretty seriously injured and had to live with our dad for like 6 months as he recovered from his injury. So
Gosh.
that all happened. And then just, the funeral and we had to deal with that and just a lot of things all at once. And that was just like one weekend
Yeah,
in
right.
life. So, and you're trying to manage those things. So, and I've been through a lot of things again the last few years, and just recently, like, a lot of stuff going on in my personal life. One of which is like this week, I have this terrible, or I should say last week, I had a terrible virus from which I'm still recovering, terrible digestive virus. And in the middle of a lot of other things, I'm not going to go through a whole laundry list here because this isn't like the, oh, feel sorry for me show. But I find as things it's like water on a rock.
Yes.
Drip, drip, drip. Water can drip on a rock and the rock will still be there. But if enough drops of water hit that rock, it's going to start to erode and they'll start to crack
Correct.
because there's no relief from the dripping.
Yes.
So is there a different approach for somebody who's got a lot of things that seem to all be going in the wrong direction at the same time? Is there a different approach that they might want to take if they have lots of different things going on at once?
Yes, absolutely. So this is going to sound counterintuitive. This is where the grit and the gratitude balance each other out. So as I've talked about the grit of taking those overwhelming changes and breaking down to manageable goals, the gift of gratitude is incredibly empowering. And what I mean by that is when we go through situations like you were mentioning, just in a weekend, when you had all these major life events happen, which we all do throughout our life, we have to have resources to navigate through, to keep going. And where the gratitude comes in is giving us strength to remember who we are, even in that weekend when you were planning a funeral and your brother was recovering and your husband was recovering and all the dynamics that were going on. So it's not being grateful for those events. It's within those events. What are you grateful for that got you through? So again, on a practical level, what I mean by this and where I started with the gratitude is at the end of a difficult day, just to stop and say, okay, what are the 3 things today that got me through the day that I'm thankful for? And maybe it's as simple as I'm thankful today is over. I'm thankful that I remembered to eat, so they can be very simple. And yet the simplicity is the power. So again, I want to make it very, very clear that gratitude is not, I'm grateful for all these events that happen to you in 48 hours. Rather, I'm grateful for the support system through that weekend. So for leaders or individuals to create that life of gratitude just reminds us this is really, really hard. And I still believe in myself. This is really, really hard, but I give myself credit that I survived the day, the week, that difficult conversation, that phone call that I didn't want to make, but I knew I had to make. So that's where the gift of gratitude comes in. It's a source of strength.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way to look at it. I try to look at the day and say, well, at least one thing went right.
Right.
Or not everything went wrong, but I don't think I practice it consciously enough. So I think that's a really good tip. And this is actually, having this conversation kind of reminded me of a funny story, which people go, God, you got a really morbid sense of humor, Cecilia. But so there was that weekend I just mentioned, we were still living in St. Louis. We weren't married yet. My mother died. My brother and my husband got injured by a drunk driver. Then we got married a couple months later. That was December because it was Christmas time. We got married in March. And then shortly after we got married, we moved halfway across the country to Maryland. And I had a job at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce at the time. It was my first job in D.C. And I was talking to a coworker and I was telling them, oh, yeah, this happened. And then we moved here. And she looked at me and said, why aren't you dead?
Oh, wow.
And I said, what do you mean? And she said, every single one of those things are considered a high level stressor. And if like one of them happens to you, you could die. And you've had these like 4 things happen to you
in a row.
Like yes, exactly. And I just looked at her and I said, well, I guess because nobody told me that. So I'm glad you didn't tell me I should be.
Wow, that's a great answer. And that's gratitude. That's what I mean by the gratitude. Just thankful you're still here, right? Like you're thankful nobody told you that.
No, I'm just like, I was like, I didn't know that. Because there's data about certain life events that are incredibly stressful. Marriage, death, moving, divorce,
right,
things like that.
Job loss.
My husband and I went through 4 of them in 4 months, and it's just kind of like, what is going on
before marriage, right?
I know. And it was like 2 before marriage, then we got married, and then 1 after marriage, and then that's where everybody was like, well, why are you still alive? I was like, I didn't know I was supposed to be dead. So
I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know I was not supposed to be here, right?
Yeah, it's like if you don't know, you just keep going, right?
Keep going, right? That is so true, and that's so our real world life experience. We just don't know, and a lot of times that can be a gift. Yeah, because we just keep 1 minute, and then the next minute we just keep going forward.
Well, and so much can change in a minute.
Yes.
So much can change in 5 minutes.
Yes.
From morning to afternoon, you might be having a bad day in the morning, but after lunch, It might turn into a good day.
A great day. Right.
So, right. I kind of look at it that way. I used to be one of the people, when I was young, when we're young, we don't know any better. And that's why I have a saying, it's like, I'm not against the young. I just don't see much use for them. Yeah, right. Because they're still young, right? They haven't had life experience. I don't know how to put stuff into context. And that's why I also say, age and experience will always overcome youth and enthusiasm, because it's like we know how to put things in context. But as a former young person, I did the same thing. I would become very discouraged. I would sometimes fall into despair. I'd feel like, oh, gee, no matter how hard I work, this isn't moving. I don't know why, whatever, and you think that's going to be it forever. And you forget that things could change tomorrow or next week. And so, as I got older and I started to realize that, I was able to kind of have those talks, when you and I were prepping for the episode, we talked about like self-talk and how we like talk to ourselves like we would talk to a good friend, like give ourselves a good advice. And so as I got older, I finally realized I needed to say to myself, well, okay, so 10 o'clock this morning really sucked. but maybe 2 o'clock this afternoon will be better, or at least the day won't get any worse. So
the day will be over. Yes, at some point. It will at 12:01. It'll be a new day, right?
It's right. And as Annie said, sang in the musical, the sun will come out tomorrow.
Right.
Even if you can't see it because it's behind the clouds.
The clouds. And it might be another cloudy day.
And that's right. And it's like, and that's okay. And it's hard, and that's why I say that about being young, because when we're all young, we just don't have that life experience,
right,
to take this thing and put it into context,
in perspective.
Say, this is what it means, right? Yeah. It's like I see so many people, like in the current administration, where we started with our example. This administration it's like you said, it's kind of like watching a reality show.
Yeah,
it is like a very entertaining reality show, and
yes.
There's drama, there's good guys or bad guys, there's arguments, people storming off from meetings, and and that's a very different way of us doing things. We're not used to that, so that seems very unsettling to people. But kind of how I look at it is like, I've lived through enough administrations now that it's like, well, it's not forever.
Right.
And if they go too far off the rails, then, it will course correct.
Right.
People don't realize our system is kind of bloated as it is right now. And our system taking a really long time to change at times with our federal bureaucracy. It does change. It's right. Built into the system.
Right.
It will course correct eventually, because people up and they have that power.
Right. Right.
So, it's sort of like that old saying about, if you give a person enough rope, they'll hang themselves.
Right.
And sometimes you got to wait, or sometimes that person will realize they need to use that rope to pull themselves back up.
As a source. Right.
Yeah.
A source of empowerment rather than a negative force.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to what you were saying earlier about we do have choice and control, even when it seems like we don't, because we can control our mindset. So we can't control the change, but we can control how we respond to that change.
And how serious we rate that change.
Yes, 100%. Yes.
How damaging is that change?
Right.
Because there's, the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, which basically says, give me I'm not doing a direct quote here, folks, but, give me the power to change the things I can, and the wisdom and the patience to accept the things I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yes.
So there's a lot of things we can't change. Like, I cannot control Vladimir Putin. I cannot control Donald Trump. I cannot control President Zelensky of Ukraine. I cannot control the outcomes of the German elections.
Right.
What I can control is how nice my mother-in-law's new room and memory care looks. So
right.
That's what I focus on,
100%. Yes.
I monitor world events, but
yes,
I can't influence them.
You have control over how much you watch, or just how you respond, just noticing your responses. And is that helping you from a mindset perspective? Like you were saying earlier, how if you think, oh my gosh, it's this way and it's going to be this way forever. And there's also doing what you said, redirecting. Well, I can focus on my mother-in-law's new room. Mm-hmm. That's one thing I can control and be a healthy distraction.
Well, and I also think that we can all influence the place where we are. So I describe it as the place where my 2 feet are.
Right.
I can make a difference.
Right.
Where I am.
Right.
And I think that keeping that in mind, we all make a difference. And that's one of the things I love about nonprofits of all kinds is no matter what kind of nonprofit you are, you're making a difference. So, you might be making a profession better. You might be making an industry safer. You might be feeding the hungry. But you're making a difference where you are in that little piece. So if all of the associations and not just associations, all the nonprofits in the world really focused on their mission fulfillment and improving the place where they are.
Yes.
Practicing acceptance,
100%.
acknowledging where they are, finding that grit you described so well to move forward. That's where, if we all did that, if every single one did that, imagine that energy.
Right. Right. That energy that would move us forward in a strength-based focus.
Yes.
Would be incredibly empowering. Yes. So I love, I guess a saying or a mantra that I love that you were referring to about your 2 feet is keep your head and your mind exactly where your feet are. So what that means is just stay in the present moment. And then that gives us the power to do exactly what you said. When we stay in the present moment, we can remember, what is the mission of my organization? How can I have power in this industry, in this community, in this world? So that helps us stay focused on the goal, the mission, our purpose, rather than being pulled down by all the change and overwhelm and uncertainty.
I love that. That's a great addendum to that, where your 2 feet are. Keep your mind and heart there too.
Yes.
And focus. That's, and of course, I love pop culture references. And that made me think of what Yoda said to Luke Skywalker in the original Star Wars movie.
Yes.
The mind's always somewhere else. It's never where you are.
Right.
And so
true.
And that's why he lacked focus.
Right.
Because he wasn't present in that moment. And, and you mentioned mantras. My favorite mantra, which is the one I try to follow the most, is from Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching, which is to conquer others is to have power, to conquer yourself is to have strength.
Wow. That's powerful. Okay, say that again. To conquer others
is to have power. To conquer yourself is to have strength.
Wow.
And for those who are not familiar with the Tao Te Ching, in English, it loosely translates to the way of virtue. Tao is the Chinese word for way. And some people translate it as the way of human virtue.
Yes.
And it's about how can we be better individuals? How can we be better people? And if you're familiar at all with like warrior culture, warrior philosophy, the warrior's greatest battle is the one they fight with themselves.
Yeah. 100%.
Yes.
And that's why that mantra is so powerful, because what we can control is ourselves, is our mindset, is our perspective.
And we don't need to impose it on other people.
Right. 100%. Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, so much in history. I'm an amateur historian. I love history and studying the threads of it in society, how it affects societies. And you see so often things go so wrong so fast when an individual or a group of individuals are trying to impose their way of thought.
Right.
And their outlook on everybody else.
Right.
And the things that seem to work the best are the groups that are inclusive and respectful of different opinions.
100%. Yes.
So it's really like, I often go, now everybody's gonna be like, okay, here she goes on one of her like segues down history. But that's why I was always fascinated with the story of ancient Antioch. It was one of the crossroads of the ancient world. Is where a lot of people, when they were traveling, they stopped there. A lot of business was done there. It was part of the route moving goods and services between, the East and the West. And ancient Antioch was just full of all different kinds of people from everywhere. Yes. And they just all got along.
Yeah.
They figured it out. They just be like, oh yeah, that guy, he's from Ethiopia. That guy, he's from Egypt. Oh yeah, this is the area where, Jewish people live, or here's the area where the Romans are. So stay out of there. But, something like that. But, they figured it out. They just kind of left each other alone to a certain extent,
Right.
and just everybody from all over the world, all different kinds of people. What we like to think of as cosmopolitan, which is what cosmopolitan is, all different kinds of people.
Right.
So bringing
And
all
that begins with respecting ourselves.
Yes.
That the mantra that you mentioned that's why it's so powerful. When we respect ourselves and trust ourselves with that, the balance of the grit and gratitude, that empowers us to respect others.
And that gives us that, I think, inner strength.
Yes, 100%.
Because if we're strong and we know why we think what we think or feeling what we're feeling, if we can explain it, if we can understand it, we won't feel threatened if people don't agree with us.
Right. So, we come from a place of, again, that respect for ourselves, so respect for others, rather than instant judgment, not listening to their perspective or not trying to understand their perspective.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that is a great point for us to start wrapping up this week, Laura, because I just realized if I'm starting to wax poetic about ancient Antioch, it's probably time to let the audience go at this point. No, it's been so great talking with you. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I think we could probably go on for another hour.
Oh, yes.
Just talking about how we could apply things.
Yes.
But before we go, I would like to ask you, what is the one thought you would like the audience to take away today? And if they would like to reach out to you and talk more about your approach to navigating change, how could they get in touch?
So that one thought is, as a leader, trust your gifts. Whatever those gifts are, trust those gifts and give yourself credit. Give yourself, appreciate those gifts, honor that gift, recognize the gifts that you have as a leader.
And how can people get in touch?
And then the best way to get in touch is just through my website, laurabratton.com.
Great. Well, this has been such a great conversation. I've gotten a lot out of it. I feel better already.
So. I loved your perspective.
Oh, thank you. So, well, we have to go rogue for now, but we'll be back next time with another exciting episode. So another reminder, don't forget to subscribe or follow us on your favorite service so you don't miss great conversations like these. Like I said, we have a lot of first-time guests this year, and we plan to have a lot more. So you don't want to miss all the new voices and new ideas coming at you in 2025. If you'd like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and how we can help your organization bloom outside the box, check out our website, roguetulips.com. You can see our services page. If you're interested in education for nonprofit professionals, specifically focused on ethics or CAE education, check out our education page. If you want to find other podcast episodes like this one with Laura, check out our podcast page. And if you'd like to know what is Cecilia thinking about this week, check out our blog, Going Rogue, which we update every week, except for major holidays. So thanks again for joining us for this episode. And on behalf of Laura and myself, we'll see you next time. That's it for this week. I hope you really loved this episode as much as I did. Thanks for listening. Learn more about how our experience and knowledge at Rogue Tulips can give your organization the strategic edge to reach its goals. Check out our website at roguetulips.com. We'd love to talk with you and see how we can work together. Thanks.